Welcome to Good Sex at NYU, a podcast about sex, relationships, health, and mental health in a sex-positive space. So if you're looking for sometimes serious, sometimes funny, and always sex-positive discussions, then you're in the right place. I'm Danielle Elliman, Associate Director of Sexual and Relationship Respect Services at Counseling and Wellness Services. I use she, her pronouns.
And I am April Fellers, a nurse and sexual health educator at the Student Health Center. I also use she, her pronouns. We are two white, cisgender, heterosexual, female-identifying clinicians, one with a medical background and the other with mental health experience, who seek to create a space that is inclusive of all identities, backgrounds, and perspectives.
Today on the podcast, we are joined by Dory Gurinsky. Dory is originally from Austin, Texas, and moved to New York to attend NYU in 2015. She fell in love with the city and has not wanted to leave ever since. Dory grew up an only child, which enabled her independence to motivate her to try new things. She now works as an assistant director at the Center for Student Life, working to support students' experience and providing resources for their time at NYU and in NYC. She truly believes that there is no college experience like NYU and feels lucky to play a small role in that. In her free time, she enjoys exploring the city. Walking around and visiting new areas in the city is one of her favorite activities. Reading books and sitting in parks, and most importantly, spending time with her friends and enjoying the fast-paced and exciting environment that is New York City. Dory, would you like to share your pronouns, and is there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners before we get started?
Sure. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And since I wrote that bio, I think it hits the nail on the head. Got it all.
Excellent. Can you share with us maybe one thing that you like about being part of the NYU community?
Ooh. I feel very proud to be a part of the NYU community. I went to undergrad there. I went to grad school there, and now I work there. And it really, fomented a lot of my identity. So I think it's great to be a part of so many different kinds of academic exposures and kinds of people. And that's my favorite thing in a nutshell. Yeah.
And because of your bio talking about going all over New York City and because you've been here for so long, where is your favorite place in New York City if you had to pick just one?
Or maybe a favorite park.
Ooh, that's hard too.
Okay, I was trying to make it easier.
Favorite place or park?
How about most recent discovery?
Most recent discovery? Well, I recently just started running. I'm a new runner.
Okay.
It's very difficult, but it's super fun. I would say I love running in Central Park. There is nothing like running with hundreds of other people who are really good and just motivates you to keep going, and you get to see Central Park. I know that's kind of a cop-out to say it's the best, but it's beautiful. And I had no idea it was that amazing because it's huge.
Yeah. I'm impressed. I feel like I'm a runner. Well, I don't like to say that.
Me neither.
I run. I get intimidated by Central Park, so that's
I just didn't.
Impressive.
I just started going.
I run every other park around it.
No, just go.
I'm just not going to go to Central Park.
No one looks at you
because there's so many other runners.
Yeah, you just start going. I didn't know which way people went. I didn't know if you were if there were tracks. I didn't know people ran on the road that runs through Central Park, but they do, and it's just so much. I run better, or it's easier to run when I'm with people, even if I don't know them. So. Okay. I love it.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
And see parts of Central Park that you might not see walking.
Right. Because you can't. You can. I do walk everywhere, like I said in the bio, but it just would take so much longer to walk.
Yeah. So we have a set of other questions that we're going to ask today.
Okay.
But, we want this to be an equitable space, so you can feel free to turn the questions around on us. If there's something that you feel is really important that you want to share that we haven't brought up, feel free to bring that into the conversation as well. So the first question is, who is your first or current crush? And is it a real person, maybe a literary character, television, fictional character, musician, something like that?
That's funny you asked that because I just was talking to my mother about who I had a crush on when I was little. Like whenever I first started discussing like who I had crushes on. And she named a kid in my first grade class I moved to Texas in the first grade and had a crush on a boy and told all my new friends. I told my new friends that I had just made. And then one of my friends, who I'm still friends with to this day, she told him. And I remember feeling so embarrassed and so upset. And I got over it. It was totally fine. But I was trying to think of, initially when you said crush, I was thinking more along the lines of someone not real. And then that made me think of movies that I watched when I was young. And so my parents they're from a generation that watched a lot of very old movies. So specifically the 10 Commandments. I don't know if anyone has seen the 10 Commandments, but
every Easter.
Wow.
Exactly. We watched it every year. And my mom had a crush on, could not tell you his name. It's whoever plays Joshua.
Oh.
Or Moses. Might be John Derek. I think that's his name. I can't remember.
Okay.
He's gorgeous. And I remember thinking, oh, yeah, he's cute. But then I was like, was that my mom rubbing off on me? Or was that my...
Right.
But I remember bringing it up later in life, being like, was I also? And she was like, yes, we all loved him.
Love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey when it comes to setting and implementing boundaries and how to communicate with friends, families, partners, whoever you're doing that with?
Sure. My journey, I think, starts with me being an only child. I didn't have siblings to communicate with, fight with, or have conflicts with, which worked out well for me. I do think how I was raised, it was okay. But I've started noticing now with my relationships with my friends, I avoid conflict because I never was exposed to the conflict in a relationship like that. And so that's been very hard to visualize or verbalize as well. But now that I've gotten older and can look at it and realize, oh, this makes sense for why I don't know how to like bicker with someone.
Yeah.
And if I do, I would normally like suppress being annoyed because I don't know that feeling. I don't have a sibling to be annoyed with or someone close in my age that I grew up with. And so now if a friend is annoyed with me, it's not the end of the world is basically what I've learned, which was really hard to understand for a very long time.
Yeah.
So I'm very glad I can determine that now. And when I'm dating or in like intimate relationships, that's even 10 times harder. 10 times harder, but it's getting better.
Yeah.
Due to the fact that I can just say that out loud. Like, oh, I honestly did not bicker with anybody growing up. That helps.
Yeah.
So it's been a journey, but really good to realize.
On the flip side of conflict, do you feel like you feel comfortable in relationships saying, like, rather than just kind of like keeping quiet, do you feel like you can speak up for yourself and kind of either set boundaries or express your wants and needs in friendships or intimate relationships?
Yes and no. It's easier to do that in like new relationships and new friendships, but my friends that I've had since freshman year of college or since I was far younger, it's very hard to start doing that because it feels like it's gonna change our relationship, or it actually feels like it's like an identity misalignment if I'm like, oh, I don't want to put too much like stress in our relationship by being like, I actually have this entire time think I've been feeling left out but never said anything about it. So very hard to do.
Yeah.
Very
People
hard.
we all kind of settle into roles.
Yes. It's hard to change
in
those
families
roles.
and relationships. Yeah.
Very
I
hard.
do some workshops and some students will come in and be like, well, I have a relationship right now and boundaries are really hard. Like, how do I go back in and set them now that I'm already in the relationship? I'm like, it's
so hard.
challenging for sure. I mean, you can do it, but I think like you have to let them know that you're working on boundaries, right? It's like, hey, I'm working on boundaries. Like, I know this is like new. I haven't had some of these boundaries. This is about me. Can you be my accountability partner and help me with this instead of making it about them? Because I think like that we want to protect our friends. We don't want to lose them.
Yep.
you know? And so all of that like fear of abandonment, not feeling worthy.
Oh yeah, that's
pops
it.
up.
That is the bottom line. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like I deal with that a lot with my students as well, like, you know, and myself.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so hard to start that conversation. But when you surround yourself by people that do care about you, it does make it easier to like input those messages 10 years into your friendship. So that's what I'm grateful for, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel like in some of your newer relationships, like as you started thinking about boundaries and communication, is there a time that sticks out for you that you were like proud of yourself or felt empowered to set a boundary, or to, you know, shape your understanding of consent and those kinds of things?
I've started saying no more, just no, instead of like, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm not feeling well, or I'm unavailable. I'm just like, no, I can't. Thanks. And their reactions are usually pretty normal. Like I just was in grad school, so I met friends in grad school. It was so easy to be like, let's start this. Like, how can I not start this trend of forcing myself to do things that I don't really want to do, or not that I don't want to do, but I sometimes need to go home and recuperate. So I just would be like, oh, I can't Saturday. That's it. So that's been helpful. It's weird, though.
That's great.
And I tell my students, no is a complete sentence.
It is.
We don't have to take care of other people in our no.
Yeah.
That's a hard lesson to learn.
Yeah.
That is what I've always done, is like beat around the bush to try to make sure someone else wasn't offended or wasn't never going to ask me to hang out again or do something. But it's like a two-way street. So if I say I'm unavailable, but I care about that person, or I would like to still have a relationship with them, I then have to keep reaching out to them. And so what I used to do is I would tell people I didn't really feel like doing anything, and then I would never talk to them again. So I was not the good at being the one to make the plans. So I kept picturing a pattern in my brain that, like, if I said no, it would be the end of our friendship. But no, I have to also, you know, put steps in to make a relationship, make plans.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm curious if you know or sort of have come to like unpack like where that came from, as far as like, did you learn that from like gender norms, society, maybe things that happened within your family or your life? Where did you learn that, you know, like you had to take care of other people in that process?
I do think I learned because probably a variety of reasons, but my parents and I, it's when I was growing up, I was basically like the third adult. And so I felt like I took care of them, and I felt like less of their child. So I don't think that's anything that they did wrong. It was the role. And it made me grow up very independently and maturely, and I really appreciated it. But I'm just so used to trying to fix things and make other people feel better before realizing what I would even want or like in that situation. And then same with my friends in high school. I was always, when I was younger, just trying to relieve the tension, always trying to like make other people feel better. If I thought someone was mad at me, I would do everything I possibly could to fix that, even though that was just not necessary. But that would give me like so much stress when I was younger if I thought I had a friend that was mad at me. And I think that's because I was so used to fixing any conflict or any emotion that was negative.
I can say I'm still working on that. Like
it's tough.
When I first got married, like my husband would be upset about something, and I just default thought it must be my fault.
Always,
Everything is, I must have done something. Even if he has described something completely unrelated to me, I was not even there. The fact that he is upset in this moment, I must have done something. And it's been like, you know, we've been together now 7 years, and it's like a lot of that undoing of like, okay, it's not always my fault.
No.
And how do I like not make it about me and like let him be upset, but also not take it personally.
Exactly. And it's something, I don't know if this is works for everybody, but if I remind myself that it's actually selfish to think it's about me, I feel better. I'm like, oh, why would I assume that my friend who I haven't seen all day is upset with me? Like, what? There's no way.
Yeah.
I did nothing.
Yeah.
So if I'm like, oh, this is a selfish experience I'm having right now, it helps me realize that other people have other things that are going on in their lives, and it's not just what's in my brain.
Yeah.
And that took me it actually made me feel better, because I used to think I was so selfless. That was just the easiest adjective to describe for myself. In a sense, I was, because I just wanted to make other people feel better. But that's selfish in a way, because I didn't want anyone to know what I really was feeling. So it feels good to be like, yeah, I'm selfish sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's okay to be selfish.
It is
and
okay.
I think it's also something that like we all normally do.
Yep.
We all are very self-centered. We're all in our heads. And of course, like we think about things from our perspective first. It takes work and emotional intelligence to put a different perspective there, right? And to say, oh, it may not be me. Or, oh, like what else could have happened, right? Like it takes work. And so sometimes we're emotionally exhausted and we don't have the capacity to do that work. But the more often and the more times that you're doing this, the easier it becomes a little bit more natural. But I just wanted to normalize that for you and for everyone, because I think that, like, first of all, we can normalize that. Hey, like everyone's a little selfish here.
Great.
And I think the fact that we even think of selfish as a negative connotation and that taking care of yourself is selfish, like that's...
But that's the best possible thing you can do. Like, that's great. And I think I used to think it was a bad thing. And then when I realized that's what I'm doing, I was like, oh, it's not a bad thing. And then it makes me feel better. Oh, it's not about me. It's like a whole loop.
Yeah.
But I really do think it's good. And I'm glad I feel more selfish as I've gotten older, because I want to be more aware of what my needs are.
Yeah.
So it's, to me, not a negative thing, but it's helped me realize also not everything's about me.
Yeah. It's a helpful realization.
Yeah.
So how do you define and experience intimacy outside some of the traditional notions of romantic sexual relationships?
I would say how I define it.
Or experience.
Experience it. I think I experience it through sharing my like day-to-day even, or my if I'm having a bad day, with my closest friends. I have a few close friends, and including my parents that I discussed with. But for me, letting people in to what I'm feeling is how I would define intimacy outside of the romantic realm. And sometimes I don't do that. So I've recognized maybe my relationships aren't built on really knowing me, but having my presence is kind of our relationship. And so I try to vocalize how I feel about people, or I've been trying to, so they know I want to have that kind of relationship where I verbally am valuing someone's time spent speaking with me, or spent hanging out with me, or walking me through why I was anxious, or if I did something that I didn't, or just talking to somebody about like what I have going on. That even feels like somewhat intimate for me. And I think that's because I grew up as an only child. So I didn't talk to anybody as a child.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's important to have someone to share your day-to-day with. And I think that can be, really hard for people when they don't have like a partner and, or someone that like they can share that with. So I think a lot of people can relate to that. Like, day-to-day stuff.
I think it's nice. And I do tend to overshare about my day-to-day, even with like coworkers. But I don't know if that's a bad thing. I just think it's a way for me to like quickly connect. I probably did it when I walked in about my hair. Yeah.
I mean, I didn't think about it as overshare. I mean, to be honest with you, I think more people can share more. I think in professional settings, like we tend to put on a mask. And so like the idea that I'm oversharing is because of the social norms that we put around, you know, and so I thought that was completely normal. Like we connected right away as a result. Because today's a rainy day, hair is a little like frizzy, and we were connecting on that. And I think like, you know, it's vulnerable to talk about, you know, certain things. And so I think it does sometimes lead to connection. Like if you see someone's uncomfortable, then that's when you're like, you got to notice cues, right?
Yeah, a little bit. But I definitely do that, like naturally.
Yeah.
It's obvious. It's probably some sort of coping mechanism, or like not in that true sense of the word, but some sort of like quick, I need to assess what the vibe is in the situation so I'm not uncomfortable. And so I assert some sort of like, let's talk about this. And then
I'm sure that other people appreciate that, though. You know, like it's kind of like breaking the ice and getting something started. And we talk about this a lot too, that in New York City that, you know, people don't necessarily have like a core group of friends that they see all the time. And so you're making the rounds, I guess, of your friends. And it's hard if you're not living with somebody or seeing somebody on a daily basis to be able to like catch someone up with your life.
It's very hard.
It's very hard. And so I think that what you're saying is really admirable, of like trying to like still keep people connected to what's going on in your life, even if they are not with you every single day. And I think that is intimate, because we don't have that opportunity to have those kinds of relationships with everybody, and it takes effort. And
two of my best friends, just I lived with them for the past year, and now I live in a studio by myself for the first time in New York. It's been a month. It's great. I miss my two best friends, but we already have plans to see each other next week. So it's like I've had to purposefully make those connections and keep them with those friends, but still put myself out there in continuing to make connections with people, meet new people, and try to find other ways of creating those connections that I'm technically not like fully lost, but don't have with me all the time anymore, which has been really weird, but good.
And we spend so much time at work.
So much
time.
And
I think, again, there's those masks that we put on. It's like, well, but we're experiencing things together, and that's a certain level of intimacy.
Yes,
Right? And so to be able to share other parts of ourselves. I've ended up like being friends with people that I used to work with. I mean, that's half of my friend group in New York City. So it's like we can become, you know, more intimate with our colleagues, depending on like everyone's boundaries. But just to say that, like, I think that's like, you know, a natural way to gain like connection and friends. And So
what were some of the dominant messages that you grew up with about sex and relationships, and how do you think those have shaped your perspective currently?
I think something maybe unique to me is that my parents used IVF to have me. And I don't know how I learned that early on, but I did. Like, I had to have been in elementary school. My mom was 45 when she gave birth to me, and there was like less than a 2% chance of them getting pregnant and the pregnancy happening, which it blows my mind. And so I learned that pretty early on, and it made me like, we always joked like, my parents didn't have sex to have me. My parents did not joke about that, but me and my friends did. I was like, well, my parents didn't have sex.
Right. And that's all of us could say, well, they at least haven't had sex at least 3 times, because I have you know, 2 sisters, right?
So that wasn't it's something I think I said probably because it was uncomfortable to talk about. But I remember saying it and knowing what that meant. Like, I remember I think we were watching a TV show with my parents. My mom were like, that's how you were made in a petri dish. And I was like, what? And then learned so much from there, which is really cool. Fertility and modern medicine. But from that, I remember 5th grade, we had to do some health class where I learned about everything. Not everything, obviously. I can't remember what the class was called, but it was something like incredibly heteronormative, just the like bare bones. And I remember being like, I feel very young to know this information. But quickly after that, my high school, it was pretty, everyone felt like we were competing with one another to like have sex first. So that was the dominant message when I was growing up. And that was strange when I look back on it, because I don't think any one of us were really ready or feeling good about that message. But it was just kind of the norm. I feel lucky. My mom took me to a gynecologist at 14. I was incredibly uncomfortable, but I put on birth control. I had like horrible periods, so it was dual focused, and I felt very supported in that way, that like if I had questions, my mom was there, and so was this doctor, and I went to her every year. So very open, but still very like focused on like being sexual with the high school boys. And so there was like, when I first started having sex, I had a boyfriend in high school. I didn't tell my gynecologist. So it's like, I went to one, but you don't have to tell them.
Right.
Like, you don't have to tell them anything.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, I wish there was more of a communication there. But I'm glad I had even someone there to talk to me about it.
Like, you wish that she would have asked you, like, did she ask you about it? And
I said no.
Okay.
I lied.
Was there a reason?
I think I was embarrassed, which I had no reason to be. I think I was embarrassed.
But you can't help the feelings that you were feeling back then. Yeah.
And my mom like went with me to the doctor's appointments, but she was not in the room.
Okay.
And I don't think she would have told my mom. And if my mom had known, I don't think it would have. I think my mom knew.
Okay.
But we didn't share that feeling with me. So for like 2 years in there, I said no to my gynecologist. Then when I became like a senior in high school and into college, I was like, yep. Not hiding it anymore.
That was like when you thought socially it was socially acceptable.
Yeah, or I felt more comfortable. Yeah.
Yeah. So there was openness, but maybe still a little shame or a little guilt or something that was happening there.
Yeah. And I do think the shame and guilt was put on by my friends. Yes.
Well, that shows that we're influenced not just by our parents, but lots of other things like, TV.
Yes. Yeah. Entertainment and peers and...
Were your friends not having sex, or what do you think was about those relationships that caused that
some
shame?
were, some weren't. It was very public knowledge in my circle of friends who was doing what, and I did not like that.
Got it.
I didn't want people to know anything about my intimate relationships with my boyfriend, and he told everyone. So that wasn't great.
Yeah. Boundary violation.
Yeah. I didn't know how to vocalize that part either. And so... And my friends weren't unsupportive at all, but that made me uncomfortable that they knew. I told them, of course, but it was just it was way too discussed what was going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that like a lot of people have like these small little gossip mills and again, just sort of not maybe realizing at the moment, but like that was a boundary for you. Like you're just not someone who wants to share that with like all of your community. Like they don't need to know.
I feel more comfortable.
Okay.
Much more comfortable. But then like we were learning. I didn't know what I was doing. Neither did the boy. Like it wasn't, it was, I think I was aware at that point, like, maybe let's not talk. Like, do you know what you're doing? Like, why are you telling, why are we, like, you're, like, at that point I was like, stop. But I didn't, I couldn't say that to everyone. But I wasn't embarrassed that we were like, experimenting. It was just that everyone was involved.
Yeah.
And I don't really think about it anymore, but now I would not mind, especially with my close friends, discussing that. I still would not want any partner I'm with to share that with their friends, but I would love to talk with my friends now. It's much more positive and less like kind of a competition.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of, engaging in sex, like how has your idea of pleasure evolved over time? And has there been things that, you've been doing differently than maybe you've done in the past?
It has definitely changed over time. When I was younger, I wasn't thinking about it as a pleasure, really, I don't think. I don't really know what I was viewing it as. I think I thought it was a special experience between two people. Wasn't usually enjoying that experience. And now as I've gotten older, I'm still kind of deciding what I find pleasurable. It has become less, sex in general has become less of a focus as I've gotten older. And I think I don't know, for me and my community, my circle of friends were not dating a lot. If I was in a different circle of friends, I think I would have a different definition or idea of what pleasure looks like for me. But when I was younger, I was putting too much pressure on being sexually active, and I've realized that's not something that I'm that focused on as I've gotten older. So decreased on what pleasure means to me, and I value finding the right person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you find pleasure in non-sexual experiences, like in other, like, I don't know, eating chocolate or like just, or going for a run in the park, like those kinds of things?
Absolutely. I really enjoy like watching movies and chatting with people about what movies we like. If I have things in common with people, I find a lot of pleasure there. And I think when I was younger, it was just like, that was what we were supposed to do, is like have sex and it be great for us, when really that was probably not great. I definitely had better times like traveling or eating food or talking about things that I enjoyed with them. But I'm also trying to figure out like what I'm passionate about as an adult, like what my hobbies are. So still learning what pleasure is.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like I might know the answer to this, but like, how important is sex in your life and in your relationships? And, you know, who do you talk about it with when you do?
Yeah. I think it has gone through so many waves. College, it was important. The pandemic was not important. I was living with my parents. Now, I would again say it's not as important. I'm not actively seeing people. I'm not around people who are seeing people, but it goes in waves, and it kind of goes whenever I feel like it. So, which is kind of fun.
Yeah. You get the control.
Yeah, and do you talk about it with those friends? Like,
yeah. Oh, yeah. If I'm going on a date, we're going to talk about it. Like, or if I have a crush on a guy, we're going to talk about it.
Yeah.
But it also like depends on the like me and my friends from college. Like, also we go in like waves together, so it's kind of nice if we're like all want to like start dating, some like going on the dating apps, we'll do it together.
Yeah,
which is kind of
moral
nice.
support.
Yeah, it's not fun out there.
No, it's really not.
So what does a healthy relationship mean to you, and you know, how did you discover like what you needed in a relationship?
I'm definitely still learning what a healthy relationship means. I think I don't know exactly what that will look like for me, because I've had different kinds of relationships with my friends as well as with sexual partners. But a healthy relationship, I know what it looks like on paper, and I know what I think I want it to be. I don't know how I will be because of how I operate, and because, like I mentioned earlier, how I used to just try to please other people, and how that creates a role in the relationship. I just started therapy, so
good for you.
Talking a lot about my attachment style, actually, and how I cannot feel like people are gonna leave me if I share too much about myself.
Is that anxious attach?
Yeah, it's like a little anxious as well as avoidant.
Okay.
But I won't avoid people if I really like them. But I'm anxious to like people sometimes. So it's hard for me to find what healthy relationships. And I know people in healthy relationships, and that's really helpful for me to like. I observe. I lived with a couple. And they're fantastic. Yeah. So I observed how they interacted, how they spoke to each other, how they communicated their needs. And that was huge and very cool to witness. And now I'm like, okay, I can do that. Yeah, I think I can.
Are you doing that with friends? Because I think sometimes we put so much like emphasis on this romantic sexual partner, but it sounds like you have some good, healthy friendships.
Yes, I do. I am doing it with friends. But again, it's taken time to like wind back the like,
right.
I can say no and you aren't going to hate me feeling. So, yes, I am doing that. But I think for me, when I do get in a relationship that is like more than friendship, healthy relationship will be not like not impossible, but it'll be a task for me to like figure out myself and how I respond in situations. And really, it will have to be with someone who's like also willing to like put in a lot of conversations. So it's hard.
And that's tough to find.
It's very hard to find. And it's a lot to expect of someone. So it's...
I don't know about that. I
Really?
feel like you should expect.
And then it's why it's hard I can't find it.
I was gonna say I think it's good to expect too, because like communication is so important.
Yeah.
And so like even if you're learning how to communicate in this relationship, like the person you ideally want to be with is either also learning or already has good communication, and
they're probably also needing to learn how to communicate with you.
Right.
So you're a new person in their life. They need to be open and receptive to like how you communicate and take that in, right?
Yeah.
Like I think that sometimes we have this very low bar for people because of what we've experienced in the past. And it's like, no, let's like expect that people are self-aware and willing to do the work, right? Like I am someone who does like relationship like therapy with people, right? I still struggle.
Yeah.
You know, but I'm aware of where I need to work.
Yeah.
And that's the most important thing. I'm not perfect, but like, this is my problem.
Yeah.
Like I struggle with conflict.
Yeah.
You know, I'm similar to you. I'm like, nope, don't want to address it. I'm going to avoid it. But I've gotten better. Right. And I tell whoever I might be in a romantic or, you know, sexual relationship with, this is my struggle.
Yeah.
You know, and if someone's like, well, that's weird, or they diminished me or whatever, I'm like, sorry, then that's not okay.
Yeah.
Right. So I think like you do have the right to have an expectation that they're doing their work too.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
They don't have to be
true.
perfect.
I think I just think that that's impossible or something. Which I know that's not rational or realistic. But I think I've put a negative perspective on finding someone that would be receptive to that. Something I have started doing or recognizing with my friendships and relationships is that you can have different friendships for different reasons or different needs.
Yeah.
And you can have partners for different reasons as well. Like I haven't really experienced it yet, but it's something I'm learning that like you can go to people for different things and still value the other person who you maybe don't share about certain things with. Does this make sense?
It does. Yeah. And we talk about it all the time because I
great.
think that like one of the things that is a societal norm is that like our romantic partner has to be everything to us.
Yes.
And I think what you're talking about is having more, you know, equity within your relationships and having like my partner may not be able to fill my need. So I'm going to go to my best friend or my other friend or this, you know, acquaintance who like, hey, we're going to go. I mean, I have volleyball friends, right?
Yeah.
Like we have experiential like intimacy through that. Do they know all of this other stuff about me? No. Right? But like they fulfill that need for me. Like
I think I'm working towards that.
Yeah.
I'm trying. I like the idea of that a lot. That sounds great.
Yeah. So. I mean, I think that's really healthy. Like I say that like one of the like unhealthy and abusive characteristics is when you know, are only like focused on the one person.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like all your eggs, one basket. Not good.
No.
You know, and that's a lot of pressure to be everything to one person.
It is.
Right.
Yes.
You know, so I think that's really healthy.
Yes. Trying to start that maybe, or at least that's what I would prefer, I think, in my relationships with people.
Yeah.
Because I like to have friendships. I like to make connections. And so knowing that I can get my needs or provide needs for people that varies also feels that I can like at least maintain relationships with people in various ways. So it's not like, oh, I haven't spoken to this person in 2 months. We aren't friends anymore. That feels bad. It's more like, oh, our relationship is like this. With other people, it's like that.
Yeah. It seems like you've done a lot of growing and thinking, and you're talking about going to therapy now. If you could go back and speak to your younger self, what kind of advice would you give?
For my younger self. So somehow my younger self knew that I wanted to leave Texas. I didn't apply to any college in Texas, which I recognize is a very privileged like feature to have. I wish when I was that age, I like looked at all the opportunity I had and felt excited. Instead, I felt like stuck. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know who I wanted to be. I didn't know where I could go. And I just went to NYU. Like I had nothing going on and honestly no thoughts in my brain. I just got here, my parents dropped me off, and I was like, now what? So I wish I could go back and tell myself, you did this. Like, you got into NYU, you came to New York, you stayed, you clearly wanted to do it. I just couldn't like put the words in my head. I couldn't wrap my mind around the fact that I wanted to go and try something else. Most of my friends stayed in Texas. I just didn't feel like I belonged there. And so I wish that's okay. Like, I wish I could have said all those things instead of just like smiling and then getting to NYU and then everything hit me at once when I'm like a freshman in college, and I'm like, oh, why did I come here? Did I even want to come here? Like, do I miss my parents? Should I not be here? So just going back and kind of shaking myself a little bit in a nice way to be like, be excited instead of like numb.
Yeah.
I'm really connecting to that, though.
Really?
I didn't move off to NYU, but I really knew that I did not want to be in Kansas.
Yeah.
You know, and I was like, how do I get out of here? And it was very focused on, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, but I knew I didn't want to. I wanted to try something else on.
Yeah. And that's a lot to know when you're young.
Yeah.
And I didn't know why. And so I was very hard on my parents. They were confused. Like, why was I crying? I was going to NYU. Why was I not excited? Why didn't I want attention about it? And I think that's because it was different. It's not. It's NYU. But like where I grew up, that's weird to go to NYU. And so I didn't like that light shed on me, but I was fully like, I gotta go. And then it was hard transitioning to NYU. It's very hard.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. Yeah. How do you navigate the intersectionality of identities that you hold, like within the context of like sex and relationships? And are there unique challenges and joys that you've experienced in that?
Well, I think I navigate my identities in relationships by, for a while, not really realizing that sometimes I was playing a role of feeling like the second class, or that I was not the priority in the relationship. Like I said, me and my high school relationship, we were just having sex. And I think I was doing that because I thought he wanted to do that. And so I would just do whatever, not even thinking about what I wanted, not even thinking about what was working for me, just kind of letting it happen. And I think that carried on for a while. And I heard about people talking about how like sex should be about the woman, or it can be, and there's all these like really exciting things you can do to like have the experience feel better. And so that was very new to me and definitely ingrained in my brain that like, no, we just need to have the sex feel good for the man and it be done. And then as I've gotten older, if you just communicate, which is something I think I've tried to work on, that like this doesn't feel good or this does feel good, it changes the whole experience. And I think that's because as women we're socialized to like have the man have a better experience, but that's like still very hard to do. You have to trust someone, and I don't always trust people immediately. So I will find myself at times reverting to those old ways. So you have to be like very mindful of it.
Yeah. That's a lot of the messages that we get in media, right? Like a lot of
in our sex ed, sometimes it's very heteronormative, but it's also very much about male pleasure.
Though they didn't say what any pleasure was for a woman.
Right.
No one said what clitoris was to me. And if they did, I was like, what? Like that makes no sense. And then as you get older, I would read about things. We would talk with our friends. Sometimes with my friends, like we would be in social circles where people would say things and I'm like, that's not true. Like this is not possible. And so just like figuring out that I think I was putting on playing a certain role that I thought was what society expected of me, and that not always is the truth.
Yeah. I think we've all been in a position where we've been a little performative.
Yeah.
Like, this is what I'm supposed to do. And that's why I think even the idea that we can fake an orgasm, it's because like we've been told like, oh, we're supposed to have an orgasm.
Told us
and,
that.
We have to like make sure that the partner that we're with thinks that they're good at this. So therefore we have to, like just the circle of that.
Yeah. It's wild and scary and sad for young people. It was sad for me that when I look back, that I thought I had to do that. When I don't even think if the other people I was with really they wouldn't have cared if I was like, oh, this is fine. Like it's,
Yeah.
Well, and speaking of that, like, in what ways do you prioritize like your self-care when it comes to sexual and intimate relationship? Like, and how does that impact like your overall well-being?
Ooh, self-care. What do you exactly mean?
What do you take self-care to mean? What's your definition?
I don't know. I think when you say self-care when it comes to sexual and like relational health, I immediately think like physical health. Okay.
It's whatever you want it to be.
Okay. Because I've been going to a gynecologist for years now. I was very careful, I think, with getting tested for STIs. I've been on birth control for a while, and so that to me was self-care, or that's what I thought of. But I don't know if that's the fun answer.
Yeah.
But I've always been very communicative with, well, not always, because when I was younger, I didn't say anything. But as I've gotten older, I've been clear, like, oh, I should get tested, or I don't need to get tested this year, or here's what I've been doing. What do you think? Or I haven't been feeling well. This hurts. What does this mean? Just trying to be aware of any changes in my body. I've been I think that was something that was passed on to me from my mom. Like, she made it very clear, like, we just go to doctors and nothing to be scared of on your body. You can tell them whatever. So that's something I think of.
Yeah.
That's a good message.
Those are good.
Okay, great.
Important. I think I'll answer that even though you didn't ask me. I think also for me, self-care can also mean masturbation.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I'm like, I haven't done that in a while. Like, I just want to reconnect with my own body.
Yeah.
And so like sometimes it's about, something that is just you connecting with your own body can be.
Okay.
And again, any message, around self-care, I think sometimes it's overused in like, the world.
Yes.
But
I think a massage, doing your nails,
everything. But like, it's just like, what do you need to like reset? Like, if you've gone out, I went on a really terrible date the other day and I had to go have I made myself cookies.
Yeah.
That was self-care.
That's like the thing that when we talk about self-care, like in the workplace, or wellness, which you all probably do a lot of work with, sometimes I think people are like, well, how do you relax? And I'm like, me relaxing is not going to fix the depression and anxiety that I have. So like, it just feels like superficial.
Yeah.
So, and I'm still learning what works for me to if I have a very anxious or nerve-wracking date. Yeah. What do I do after? I probably will sit and watch a movie, and that's what self-care is for me. Like really just relaxing and taking my mind off of whatever it is that's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that sometimes we think of self-care as activities to disengage, and I think it was actually my therapist that helped me realize this. Sometimes self-care is actually engaging. Sometimes self-care is like checking that thing off of your to-do list that you've been avoiding for so long, because then you feel this relief and this weight lifted off of your shoulders. Yeah. And like, so self-care doesn't have to just be like, oh, I'm just disengaging and I'm not going to think about my problems anymore and then I'll feel better. Like, I think you're right. Like, how does that help you feel better?
It doesn't.
It might help you numb and like not think about it for a little while, but those things are still going to be there.
Yeah.
Afterwards.
And sometimes you do need a break.
Yeah.
If you're like anxious or there's like these, traumatic like memories or whatever. But I also, when I end my session with any client that I'm working with, I will say this line of, how are you going to be kind to yourself? People will automatically interpret that as self-care. Like they will start to just say, and I'm like, okay, well, that sounds really good. But what else can you do to be kind to yourself? This could mean saying something nice to yourself.
Yeah.
Like turning off the critic for a little bit, or whatever like else you can think of, but it like doesn't have to be I'm going to go get a massage or I'm going to go do yoga. Like it just means like, you know what, like I'm going to be my cheerleader for 5 minutes instead of beating myself up.
Yeah.
So our definition of self-care is important to note, right?
I very much agree with your definitions of self-care. I've always been a little reluctant in spaces to be like, oh, for self-care, I'm like, what do you want? I sit on the couch. Like, but really, in theory, I am going to therapy. I am working on being a better person for myself and for the people I surround myself with. And that is engaging.
Yes. And I would say that's part of the question. Like, what are you doing for self-care for your sex and relationship? You're going to therapy.
I am. And we talk a lot about my relationships in therapy. So
well, you're also maybe going for walks.
I go for a lot of walks.
You know, like
running around Central Park.
That does make me feel better. It does. It makes me feel better, but I can also use it without thinking like it's to me, when exercise I really do enjoy, but to me that's not the self-care that's going to help my mental health for me.
But maybe you need both and.
I need both and.
Yeah. You know, it doesn't have to be one or the other.
I got to talk.
Yeah, exactly. So we're at our last question.
Okay.
What does good sex mean to you?
Good sex means to me, the first word that came up in my mind was trust. I think if you feel, for me personally, if I feel trust and a connection with someone in an intimate way, that's good sex. I don't know what that has to look like, but that is something that you share with someone that you might not share with someone else at that moment, maybe at another time, but connecting and trusting someone in a way that you might not be in another moment. Could be intimately, it's intimately, and using that to create an experience between you and the other person or other people that makes you feel like pleasurable and excited and happy. But really, I think it starts with trust for me.
Yeah. I think it does for a lot of people. And I think that's really important because I think when you have trust, like you can be silly and you can be, you know, adventurous and you can do have all the different adjectives.
Yeah. And it can look differently for everyone. Like trust can be a very different line for people. So for me, that's something that, and I trust my friends too in ways. So to me, good sex just looks really like trust and communication.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I feel like we get to see you in this place of like really growing and thinking about a lot of these things. And so I'm just grateful that of your willingness to be here and share some things and like especially your story about coming to NYU. I think a lot of our students can relate to that experience. You know, coming to a big city if they are not from a big city and feeling out of place or
scary.
Missing home is definitely, I think, very normal. So thank you for sharing that experience. Where can people find you around campus? I know we talked about your job at the Center for Student Life.
Yeah.
And so what does that look like and how do you engage with students on a regular basis?
My office is on the 7th floor of Kimmel in, 60 Washington Square South. 7th floor. I work primarily with the fraternities and sororities. So if you're interested in finding a community on campus, you can come to my office and I can get you connected with a lot of student leaders. And so I work a lot in community building, event planning, networking opportunities, just all around student engagement. So 7th floor of Kimmel.
Awesome.
That's where I am.
Come and find her. Dory's great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. If you have questions about the podcast or anything we talked about today, please feel free to reach out to us at goodsex.podcast@nyu.edu. This email address is monitored during business hours and may take 3 to 4 days for follow-up. We are definitely open to critical and thoughtful feedback, as we didn't cover everything in this episode and might have said something that was inaccurate or that had a negative impact on someone. If you have questions about your sexual health and are an NYU student, you can connect with our Student Health Center sex expert at sexpert@nyu.edu or schedule an appointment through the Student Health Center portal. Look at our show notes for additional information and resources, including organizations, articles, books, and videos.
If you have urgent mental health concerns, safety issues, or you are worried that someone might have caused harm to you, or that you might have caused harm to someone, then you can contact NYU's Confidential Wellness Exchange at 212-443-9999. Chat with them using their mobile app or email them at wellness.exchange@nyu.edu. For anyone, NYU or non-NYU listeners, you can call the National Sexual Assault Hotline at 1-800-656-4673, the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233, or the National Mental Health Hotline. Simply dial 988 from anywhere in the U.S.
Thanks for listening, and tune in to our next episode where we continue to talk about good sex at NYU. Subscribe to the podcast to hear all of our quickies and interviews with NYU community members. Thanks to our content contributors for this episode, Bernadette Kerr, Alyssa LaFosse, Dr. Dominic Baini-Amisa, Zoe Raguzios, and to our health promotion team, Anna Genova, Jenny Mellum, Parade Stone, and Arna Dixit, and to Gotham Studios and Karen Ortman.